I guess let's get started. So let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1. And we have Solomon identifies himself, and he is the son of David, as he says, and there's no reason to doubt that. The testimony is actually very strong. I know there's some debates, archaeologically speaking, does Solomon really exist? Well, they are finding more and more things as time goes on. Basically, that time in Israel's history is very ancient. It would go very deep into the ground. Certainly, they found many things from Hezekiah's time, and there's no question about that. And remember, Hezekiah found, in fact, they even found bullets, seals with Hezekiah's name on it, among other things. And I think there's like a saying, it says, with healing in his wings, which not Micah, but Malachi talks about. And so there's a seal. Hezekiah's seal has this, they found it. And then on this seal is recorded, inscribed that with healing in his wings. So it has Hezekiah's name on it. And then, of course, with healing in his wings, that goes back to Malachi, which actually occurs after Hezekiah by a couple hundred years. So that tells you this is something which the wings of God, the wings of Yahweh, the living beings that is mentioned in the book of Ezekiel, the glory of God, that was something well known and something that people understood. And even in Hezekiah's time. And remember, Hezekiah was healed from his sickness. So they made a special seal reflecting that. So we can certainly get back to Hezekiah. There may be some things that Solomon, in Jerusalem, it's harder to find, but they have found Solomon's stables in Megiddo. They have found some other things here and there. It just, basically when in the city of David and Jerusalem there, they cleaned a lot of things out, okay, and replaced Solomon's stuff with their own stuff. So the kings that replaced Solomon afterwards, a lot of that stuff would disappear. So that's actually not very surprising. So let's get into Proverbs 1:1. We'll just read verses 1 to 7. And we'll just try to recognize that Solomon is the wisest man that has ever lived. That's how we finished off last Saturday. And notice the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. To know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. To understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So here we have Solomon's introductory, presentation of his book on wisdom in the book of Proverbs. And here he identifies himself as the son of David. Let's take a look at C from our notes. Proverbs 1:1, Solomon built the Jerusalem temple, which lasted until 586 BC when it was finally destroyed by the Babylonians. So Solomon will be the one that finally builds the temple that David really spent a lot of time getting ready to have that built. David wanted to build it. He was not allowed to do so. It was given to Solomon. And, I bring this up a lot lately because I think it's very important, is that David never had what you would call a real temple experience per se. The tabernacle was really never functioning properly at any time in David's life. The Philistines destroyed the tabernacle. The ark itself was in someone else's backyard, some priest, his backyard at his home. And then the other priests, they met elsewhere. And then, they had their tent and, they would do whatever that they were doing, sacrifices and things like that. But the Ark of the Covenant was not there and it was not connected to it. And then Saul, jealous of David, killed all the priests that were at Nob. I think it was at Nob. And so we have all these problems, okay, that was going on with David's life. And so when David writes these Psalms, okay, what's going on? Well, there's no temple, there's no tabernacle functioning. And yet the Psalms are rich, they're permeated with tabernacle spirituality. Okay, why is that the case? Because David read the book of Exodus, which talks about the building of that tabernacle. He knew what the meaning of that tabernacle was, what it was for. He read the book of Leviticus. So even though he could not offer a sacrifice, a lot of times he's on the run, he did so with his own personal life. And so he understood the great meaning, okay, of the tabernacle. And so he'd always wanted a place of worship. And so he was going to, he wanted to build a temple in Jerusalem. And God says, "No, David, you're a man of war, and I want the man that's going to build the temple to be a man of peace." And that was Solomon. Solomon's kingdom was a peaceful kingdom right up until almost the very end. Then we start to see problems at the end because Solomon practiced idolatry because of all of his foreign wives he was married to. And this just created problems down the road and led to the division of the kingdom. And so that this was Solomon's great sin. So with David, it was murder and adultery. Okay, with Solomon, it's idolatry. And God's people are very prone to sin. I don't mince words with this. I don't sit there and try to discuss how Christians can't sin. I mean, I don't even get into that conversation. It's very strange to me that a lot of guys teach that kind of stuff. That's very foreign to me. It certainly had nothing to do with my personal experience. And I sometimes wonder what's going on with these guys. I mean, are they really serious about sin? And you look at texts like we see in Solomon and David, okay, these are very serious sins. What do you do about a sinning believer? Okay, well, does that mean he's not a believer? No, it means God's going to discipline him. And Hebrews tells us if there's no discipline, then they're not a child. Then you can talk a child of God. Then you can talk about the problem of nominalism, which of course is a huge problem. It's everywhere. Okay, a lot of people think they're believers and Christians, but they're not. But we're not talking about that. We are talking here, we're talking about believers that are not functioning rightly. Okay, they're doing things that are wrong. David did that. Okay, and then these are very serious sins. You have Solomon. He also commits serious sins. His sins of idolatry will lead to the division of the nation. It will split the kingdom. Okay. There's many pastors. Okay, maybe I think about myself too. You have to warn yourself. Okay, the things that they do, are they splitting God's people? See, okay, because of some of the things that are going on, and you have to be honest with what is happening here. And this is a history lesson. I don't get into this theological mysticism. To me, it's just foolishness. I mean, I don't take it seriously. It goes in this or out the other. And it's just mysticism. I don't listen to it as idealism. It's got nothing to do with reality. And you have to learn to realize that the book of Hebrews says, he talks about the easily besetting sin, guys. Sin is easy. There's nothing to it. Sorry. I mean, that's what the Bible says. James tells us that we stumble in many ways. He says many ways. Should we do it? No. Does God condone it? No. Okay, if you don't confess it, what's going to do? God's going to discipline you, and sometimes it can be very serious, okay, which is what we see in David's life. Okay, Solomon. Okay. Some people sin unto death. I mean, things like God takes you home early. I mean, that's how God deals with these problems, and they're not fun. And even everyday life is full of discipline. Okay, the fallen world we live in, God's already got it set up to where as you want to walk with God, okay, those things are going to be geared against you. And Solomon's going to run into that problem. And he tells us all about it in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's possible that, if you look at, Solomon sort of recovered himself at the end. And he writes like the book of Ecclesiastes as he kind of drifted and then got himself back on track at the very end of his life. But the consequences of what he did still remained. See, the kingdom still split. He had to hand the kingdom over to a son that was not nearly as good as him. And this is a common problem. How many, we have a church, okay, and the pastor dies or something like that, and you hand the church over to some guy and, it turns into chaos, okay. That happens a lot. Okay, see, these are history lessons. And we need to be more serious about what the Bible historically records. So we have too much what I consider to be idealism, mysticism even in our Christian circles. Of course, it's in our world anyway, and it reflects our pagan culture. So this is all recorded First and Second Kings. Finally, Solomon is going to build that temple. That's a long time. David wanted to build it, was not allowed to do so. Some people have suggested they've actually found the Temple of Melchizedek, where in the city of David. Apparently, I hear these things. So I talked to Dr. Wayne House, my friend, and I said, "Is that true?" And he says, "Well, is Melchizedek's name found there?" And I said, "Well, I don't think so." Okay, so I mean, you hear things, and but yes, something going on. They found some strange buildings. Okay, some pagan worship, maybe things going on before that may go back to the time of Melchizedek, and maybe that's where David kept the ark up until the time when finally that is moved up to the temple. And that is actually very nearby what you call the Gihon Spring, which is where Solomon was anointed to be the king. Let's take a look at number one. After conquering Jerusalem, David moved the ark into the city that had been separated from the tabernacle because of the spiritual disaster of Eli's sons at the end of the judges period. Okay, so that's another history lesson. I mean, Eli, his problem, he didn't discipline his sons. Okay, he did it. He was a lousy father. Samuel wasn't much better. I don't think, David didn't do a very good job. His kids started to fight each other, and one brother killed another, and then one of the sisters was raped, and of course he's got 8 wives. I mean, no wonder you've got chaos. I mean, God says, the two shall become one. Okay. And with kings and leadership and politics, that there's a temptation to avoid that. And Proverbs 31 says, guys, watch out. And of course, Solomon ignored that and got himself in all kinds of hot water with regard to all the foreign nations. So David moved the ark into the city that had been separated from the tabernacle. And this is recorded in 1 Samuel 1 to 22. This is where Eli, his sons were basically, this is why the tabernacle in Shiloh was destroyed. It doesn't say that in 1 Samuel. However, there's a text, I think it's somewhere in Chronicles. It says that the tabernacle was destroyed. God's going to destroy the tabernacle. And he'd got, see, the warning is given in the modern times, in those days. God's going to destroy the temple just like he destroyed the tabernacle at Shiloh. And that's exactly what happened in Jerusalem. And Eli was there, and he didn't discipline his kids. His kids were basically stealing from people the sacrifices. They were sleeping with women right there at the tabernacle. And then the Philistines become bigger and bigger and more powerful. They get more dangerous. And then they come in. And so now we have to fight the Philistines. And so the sons are scared with them, and they have no spiritual life. They're not saved. I assume they're not saved. And so they're doing all kinds of foolish things, depending on rituals to save them from the Philistines. And of course, that doesn't work. Then the Philistines take the ark, and then Eli's sons die. Okay. And then the news all goes home to Eli while he's sitting there in Shiloh. By the way, we were there this summer. The area of Shiloh, very interesting place, sits on a higher, kind of a high mountain like Jerusalem. And, so there's Eli. They think they have found actually the porch area where Eli would have sat and where he heard the news. And he hears the news, and he was a heavy, fat guy. And, and he actually fell over and broke his neck, died. Okay. That's a real history lesson, guys. Okay. Eli did not do a good job with his family. Samuel will then take over. Samuel was actually, he was the priest, and then Samuel will become also, he's the last of the judges. So he's kind of a priest, and he's a judge. And then after Samuel dies, is what's going to happen is turned over to the kings. And because Israel wanted to be like all the other nations, they wanted to have a kingdom. God says, well, I don't want that. And I mean, he allowed it, okay? And, sometimes God will answer your prayers positively, and sometimes that's not good, guys. And there was chaotic underneath the judges' time period, but God actually, okay, as soon as the king comes in, what's he going to do? Okay, everybody wants to, they want to have a strong power. They want to have a king. They want to be like everybody else. And then there's a big laundry list. Okay, as soon as that king comes in, what's he going to do? He's going to take everything, guys. He's going to take your kids, put them to work. He's going to, take over your farms. He's going to take over your land. He's going to hire people away from your homes, and he's going to multiply, all kinds of things to himself. Okay, and so this is something God was warning the nation about, and that goes all the way back to 1 Samuel, and so that basically the kings are now going to replace the judges in terms of making judgment. And this is exactly what we see with David. Saul, of course, that he was a poor judge king. David did much better, but he had his problems. And now Solomon is going to become the judge. And then he will build the temple. And then, that'll be nearby his home. And that's a big history. I mean, a lot of things happened. We're talking about 120 years in between. Saul, he reigned for 40 years. David reigned for 40 years. Solomon reigned for 40. So a little bit less than that because Solomon takes over the first decade. He's going to build that temple. Let's take a look at number 2. David wanted to build a house temple in Jerusalem, but in the Davidic covenant, God promised his son would build it instead. And really, the fulfillment of that will only be through the Lord Jesus Christ. He will be the real builder of God's real temple. And remember, Jesus says, he was a carpenter, right? And he's a builder, and that was his life. And so he told the disciples before he died, the night before he died, John 14-17, that I'm going away and I'm going to my Father's house. I have many mansions, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. And eventually, we know the Jerusalem temple is going to come down to the earth. That's in the new heavens and new earth, Revelation 22. But also, we have 21 and 22. But also, even the millennial temple will be awesome. And this is described in the book of Ezekiel. So the Messiah will be the one who builds that temple. And this is specifically so stated in the Davidic covenant. Number A, since David was a man of war and much bloodshed, God decreed that his son, who would be a man of rest and peace, would build the temple. And we know that to be Solomon. So, David is a type of Christ, but so is Solomon. So Solomon is more like the type of Christ in a sense. He's like the king of the kingdom. David represents the suffering and struggle to get to the kingdom. And so basically David's, his messianic aspect of his life was going to prefigure the sufferings of Christ, whereas Solomon is going to prefigure the glory of Christ. And this is something which is amazing in of itself if you really sit down and think about it. God is using history to teach everybody about his big plans that he has for the future. Okay. It's not based on idealism. It's not based on mysticism. It's rooted in the reality of history. I say that over and over again because I just see this is a big problem among so many people. Let's take a look at B, verse 1:1. David made preparations to build the temple. So it's a big project. I mean, he spent years organizing things, getting materials, that type of stuff. So, David, he spent money and he wanted to get that done. And then number C, after Solomon became the king of Israel, he built the temple. And this is what we see recorded for us in 1 Kings chapter 6-8, and also 2 Chronicles chapter 3-5. So Solomon was a type of Christ. And Proverbs 1:1, biblical types, what are they? They are historical figures, events, places, rituals that both prefigure in the sense they predict and predict the future to teach present generations about God's prophetic plans. So God is always using the reality of history, of life, the things that are going on around us, both objectively, subjectively, to predict the coming kingdom or the coming something. Like David will predict the coming sufferings of Christ. Okay. So if David is a type of Christ and you see all of his suffering that he went through in the first part of his life, that's going to tell you the Messiah, if David is a real type of Christ, he's going to have to suffer too. Okay. And then later, very interesting is that both David and Solomon in their glory, okay, they had problems with sin, this is the problem with when things are going good, the human heart simply cannot handle it. Even believers struggle with this. You have to be very careful of this when things are successful. When a lot of people listen to you, Solomon had lots of people listening. David was very popular. Okay, that's a danger zone, and you have to be very careful of that. And a lot of times you run into people, and they know somebody high up, supposedly in the social ladder, and you try to climb that ladder to reach those people to try to get some hearing. You're looking at me. So Solomon tells us how to climb the social ladder in Proverbs chapter 3. You do it by faith. You do it by practicing wisdom. You do it according to God's grace, and you will grow in favor with God and men. And you take it one day at a time. That's God's plan for success. But everybody wants to go the quick route. I mean, this is what they want. I mean, it's really this is God's plan. And Solomon warns his own sons, okay, be careful. Number two, and of course, this is all a history lesson. So God uses types to teach us. And, Solomon, David, right at the end of the day, their kingdoms had problems. So what does that tell you? Well, that means that the kingdom of God is not on this earth. So we're not there. Solomon had the greatest kingdom ever. It's not going to be, what's the word, reproduced or relived. It's not going to happen. That was the Atlantis, okay, that only lasted for a few years and then it went away. And the book of Ecclesiastes was written late in that period, describing the vanity of it all. Okay. And I just, I listen to lots of other Christian friends that I have, and they're good friends, I mean, lots of people believe in amillennialism. There's going to be no kingdom. And I'm just looking at these guys. I mean, and they think that the church is supposed to bring in the kingdom now. And, we're getting absolutely steamrolled. Okay. Right now. I mean, look at what's going on. I mean, then we got a guy that was shot this week. I mean, he was pro-Israel. He's been trying to reach the campuses across the country because kids are so mixed up. And then you look at all the discussions on Facebook, and I'm trying to think, what I wouldn't mind saying something myself, but it's so evil now. I mean, people are so confused that you have to untangle so many things that it's almost a hopeless cause to even talk about it, to even begin. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but that's I'm just really guarded anymore what I say in Facebook because boy, I mean, I'm just looking around and I'm thinking, some guy says this, and I'm thinking, okay, some of that I agree with, but we got some big problems here, here, and here, and then someone else will say this, and it's the same kind of a problem. And a lot of it is that people do not understand history. Okay, the so-called Antifa people, they're anti-fascist. Well, they are the fascist guys. I'm sorry. I mean, the fascists are the ones who call themselves the anti-fascists. I mean, this is just, then he proved it by shooting a guy. Okay. And so then the guy that supposedly believes in gun rights, he is now to blame, okay, for the guy that shot him. Okay. I mean, this is the kind of discussions that are going on in our world today. And it's just absurd. How do you talk with absurd people? It's getting to be very difficult. And the madness of our world is just I don't even know what to say anymore. It's really something. So you have to realize Solomon says it's all in vain. There is no kingdom this side of the grave. The church is not going to bring in the kingdom. The church has its own problems. Okay, the people that start to have an impact, maybe on some level, like Charlie Kirk. Well, the devil just shoots him. Okay, to put a stop to it. Okay, I mean, that's how it works. I mean, we live in a very fallen world. Okay, David suffered a lot. Solomon got sidetracked by idolatry. Okay, see, that's the reality of the situation. And you cannot save the world. But God's not going to save it. God's going to destroy it. He will save you out of it. That's how it's done. And the Bible is very clear on this. Okay. And then God will set up his kingdom. God will do that. It's 2 Samuel 7, but even the Davidic covenant specifically says that the Messiah, he will build the house of God. And it says the Messiah will build a house for you, David. That's what the text says. Jesus will build the house for David. David will not build the house for God, for Jesus, for the Messiah. Jesus will be the one, the Messiah will build the house for David. See, we have everything backwards, guys. It's all about ourselves and nothing about God. I shouldn't say nothing, but we just need to be corrected all the time by God's grace and by his power, his wisdom. Notice Proverbs 1:1, number 3. Of course, Solomon was David's son. That's number 2, as is the Messiah, right? So Solomon is like, a real type of Christ. He's the son of David, right? And Jesus, he was called the, son of David. I mean, at least the people who wanted to be healed, they called the son of David, son of David. Pharisees got mad. He was called the son of David. Matthew 22, a very interesting passage, verses 41 to 45 is repeated in the other gospel. Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's about ready to die. All the lawyers and legalists are all there. All they want to do is trap him over something he might say so they can nail him. They don't care about what's right and wrong, what's just, what does the word of God say, what does the real Torah say. They don't care about any of that. All they want to do is catch him and destroy him. And so then David, they're asking him all these questions, testing Jesus constantly all week long, trying to trap him. They're trying to trap him politically. Okay, I tell people, they look at me and then they just sort of they roll their eyeballs that they can't figure this out. Look at most laws, guys, are written to what? It has nothing to do with justice. It's to trap other people. That's all it is. And it's just legalism. Trap your political enemies. Okay. So that's all they're doing. They're trying to, Daniel, he went through that. Okay. Even Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the same thing. Okay. It's a misuse of law. Law is not for those purposes. Law is not designed to make my life nice. That's to make things nice for somebody else, to give it, to make the world fair for everybody. The law is for justice. That's it. You can't use it for salvation. You can't use it to fix people. You can't use it to make them better, to make them nicer. That's a misuse of law. Okay. So these guys are misusing the law. They will use the law to commit the biggest murder in human history. They killed the Son of God. Who did this? The Romans and the Jewish people. And the Jewish people were proud of their law, their own legalism. So were the Romans. Okay. And look what happened. So they're trying to catch Jesus. So Jesus pushes back and he says, okay, guys, David's son, who is he? So he asked them a question. And they said, well, he's the son of David, the son of God. And they say, well, he's the son of David. And I said, well, then he asked another question. He says, well, how can he be David's Lord then from Psalm 110 if he's the son of David? I mean, you'll see David's the king. So who can be David's Lord? And Psalm 110 specifically says the Messiah will not only be David's son, of course, that's 2 Samuel 7, but the Messiah will also be David's Lord. So he asked him a question, how can the Messiah be both David's Lord and David's son at the same time? And these guys, they left. Okay, then they didn't really want to, no more questions. We're done with that. They couldn't answer that question. The simple answer is very clear. The Messiah is the God-man. That's why he's the Messiah. Why is the Messiah going to build the kingdom? Why, the temple? Why is Messiah going to be the one who offers the kingdom? Because only the God-man can do it. People are fallen. And the best that this world can get, this side of the grave, is Solomon's kingdom. And the book of Ecclesiastes says it was all in vain. Say that's a history lesson. Does that mean I shouldn't learn to be wise? No. Because God is going to discipline things. And if you learn God's wisdom, then maybe you can escape some of this discipline personally in your own personal life. And that's what we're talking about here in the book of Proverbs. Okay. Let's take a look at number 3. Solomon built the temple as the Messiah will do. Okay. Number 4, Solomon was a man of rest and peace as the Messiah is. And then number 5, Solomon's kingdom prefigured the Messianic kingdom of rest. So it's called, the rest of God. Let us enter into God's rest. The book of Hebrews, he's talking about entering into the kingdom with reward, reward for obedience. That's what God wants. He wants to share his glory with us. And as we walk with God today, we build up our pension, our retirement to enjoy eternity with the Lord and his eternal kingdom. And that's exactly what is discussed. And even the Sermon on the Mount gets into that whole discussion. What do I have to do to get rewarded in God's kingdom? Okay, well, humility. Okay, grace, meekness, mercy. Don't be like the Pharisees. Okay, the whole Sermon on the Mount was written against all the legalists. Okay, and so Jesus is trying to correct all the false things they were doing. It's just a show, and it wasn't real. And Jesus says, guys, you need to focus on my word, not the words of these Pharisees, which is a misuse and misunderstanding of God's real word. And they misunderstood so many things. It was all about them, trumpeted how great they were, how good they were. And Jesus says they get their reward in full today, and that'll be it. God wants you to have eternal reward in his kingdom, and that requires perseverance in God's word. Notice here, let's take a look at number 6. Solomon was the greatest king of the earth at that time, probably the greatest king of all. 2 Chronicles 9, verse 22. Number 2, Solomon wrote other books in the Old Testament. So number A, Solomon wrote the Song of Songs, portraying the proper romantic love between a husband and his wife, starting with courtship, the wedding, and maturing matrimony. So that's great. The only problem is he seemed to multiply that too many times. Okay, I don't want to belabor the point, but it's a very interesting song that is written by Solomon about marriage. Number B, Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes, where he wisely demonstrates the vanities of the secular fallen world cursed by God, that even his own royal privileges and pleasures could not rise above. So we've been talking about that. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. And of course, Solomon is the author of Proverbs. Okay, he's the author of Ecclesiastes as well. That's the next book over. He also wrote the Song of Solomon, which is even after that. But notice it says here, chapter 1, verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now we know he's identified himself as Solomon. And what does he say, verse 2? Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. The world is vain. It's all for nothing in some sense. A lot of things we do, I mean, we repeat ourselves. It all is seemingly for nothing. And those things interfere with what really needs to be done, because you have to spend so much time with vain things in order to survive. Okay, and so and even Solomon understood this problem. The world is fallen, very fallen. You can't overcome it. Even Solomon, all of his riches, they had lots of riches and gold. And then Solomon also talks about certain proverbs, we'll get there, that the more money you have, everybody else shows up to take it. Sharks, they all come looking for money. They want to work for you. They want to do this. They want to do that. And so then the money all flies away. And so this happens all the time, guys. I mean, some of Hollywood's people, they get rich and, they lose all their money, usually on drugs, rock and roll. And some of you, John Wayne, he was really rich and he lost everything toward like in the middle of his career. However, he lost it all because he was too generous he gave so many things away to so many people. And then he realizes his accountant says, you got no money left. Okay. And so he had to start over and he got in big trouble at the Alamo trying to make that movie. So, I mean, look at it. I mean, you make money and then everybody shows up to take it. And Solomon talks about that problem. And that's exactly what happened to Solomon's kingdom. And at the end of the day, Solomon's kingdom became a debt country, basically. Slavery. How did the rich this kingdom become so wrapped up in slavery? Well, anyway, it's a history lesson, okay, that this is what happens in real life. You and I need to learn these lessons and take them seriously. Let's take a look at Ecclesiastes verses 12, the same chapter. Well, even verse 3, what advantage does a man have in all his work which he does under the sun? That's it's a good question. The work environment has been basically reduced to vanity. This goes back to Genesis. As I've said, I tell people God's going to work us to death. That's it. To dust you shall return. By the sweat of your brow you'll sweat and work, and then you shall return back to the dust from which you are. That's the discipline of God. And you cannot fix that, guys. Socialism is trying to fix that problem, and then it's all they've done is make it so complicated that we have no idea what's going on. Communism tried to fix that problem. So did National Socialism. It did nothing. You're fighting against God, and it all ends up with things that don't work. And our world is full of this kind of stuff. Then Solomon will talk about even the very creation itself reflects the vanity of the world, how the weather works, this and that and the other. Notice verse 10, is there anything of which one might say, see, this, it is new, already has existed for ages, which were before us. Now, a lot of people, there's all kinds of new things today. Well, look at Solomon, a very contemporary kingdom. A lot of new things, at least from a superficial point of view. Plato will tell you that all the things that are new are really not new at all, and they're pretty old, which this goes back to Solomon here. And, even Jesus lived in a very contemporary world, which we don't realize. The Sea of Galilee was a very, very exciting place. Lots of things were happening there. And Herod had his capital there. I mean, it was a very contemporary place. And the Roman Empire was very contemporary. But all those things eventually just disappeared, guys. And now you just see the pillars of it. Roman roads have survived, interesting, up until better roads that they made in those days and now. How did they do that? Well, they weren't stupid. They made the Romans made better roads than we make today. And by the way, the scientists still don't know how they did it. They're trying to figure out what are the ingredients that they looked at inside the concrete, and not I shouldn't call it concrete, but the things that they used to make those roads, and they're still kind of baffled by it. How did they make these roads to be so good? Quite a system that they designed. So what's the problem? It isn't that things are new. He says, here's the issue. There's no remembrance of earlier things. People have forgotten it. Most things are forgotten. What's left in history is very little. By the way, the Muslims burnt down, most of there's a big library in Alexandria, Egypt. And at one time, the history records there was 1 million copies in that library. That's a lot, guys. Even today, you have a library that has 1 million books in it today. That's serious. Okay. They had 1 million copies, okay, and of the Greco-Roman world, and the Muslims later on just burnt that place down. And today the Muslims don't admit that, but that's what people always knew for centuries until our political correctness now robs people from any historical objectivity and leave us with political mysticism that makes the problem worse. Okay, so I mean, there's no remembrance of these things. There's all kinds of things we would have liked to known about the ancient world, but we don't even know what's going on today with what we have now. I mean, how many pastors really teach the Bible? I mean, I have a hard time just teaching through one book. Okay. I mean, trying to get it done and it takes so much work. And the Bible is just a simple book, but I mean, it's not. It's a great book. And you can spend so much time with it, guys. I mean, wow. And it's just a lot of these things have simply been forgotten. And also the later things which will occur, there will be for them no remembrance among those who will come later still. Okay, each generation has to learn its own lessons, and they never do. That's the reality of the situation. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I set my mind to seek and explore by wisdom concerning all that has been done under the sun. It is a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. Think about it. Look at what's going on now. Can you deny what Solomon says? No. It's a grievous task. I mean, with a lot of grievous things are going on right now at all levels. I have seen all the works which have been done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after wind. Under the sun. I mean, that's the fallen world under the fallen universe in which the sun gives us light, and yet it still has problems in the sense that, it's not what it used to be at one time. The Garden of Eden is gone. Verse 15, what is crooked cannot be straightened. That's a statement from Solomon. I never understood that until I started working on our farmhouse at home in Olympia, Washington. And then oh, wow, isn't that the truth? Basically, you had to things were so crooked in that house that if you made it straight, it would cause everything else to look like it was crooked. So what you had to do, every board had to be a little bit crooked so that you wouldn't notice the problem. Again, the house has been settling for 100 years. It's made of wood. Then what he says, what is lacking cannot be counted. Solomon had a rich kingdom. You can't count all the things that are lacking. There's never enough bullets. There's never enough whatever. You're always running out of something. You have to start over. You have to go to the store. I mean, whatever, guys. Even in our modern materialistic world, everything is always running out. Scarcity is the law of economics. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who are over Jerusalem before me. and my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. And I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And that's, the book of Proverbs tells us all about that. And I realized that this is just driving me after the wind because nobody listens to it. And then you yourself have a hard time practicing it. Because now notice verse 18, in much wisdom, there's much grief. And increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. I mean, why do we have lack of wisdom? Because the more wisdom, the more you know, the more you realize the depth of the problem. And for the most part, it becomes too painful to think about. That's why we have so many superficial people. They just don't want to think about it because it just causes them to be depressed, okay. Which is all understandable. Solomon got depressed. Okay, and so at the end of the day, this world is fallen. You cannot fix it, and that is a very hard lesson for people to take in. But this is something that the Bible teaches over and over and over again. Let's take a look at. Let's go to Isaiah 11. Okay, Isaiah chapter 11. Let's go there. The book of Isaiah, an incredible book of history, an incredible book of prophecy, an incredible book of poetry, an amazing book. Isaiah lived about 200 years after Solomon, maybe, about 200 years after Solomon. And he was, King Uzziah was the king when when Isaiah first became the prophet. And then Hezekiah, I think, is toward the end of Isaiah's career. And Hezekiah was a very good king. But let's take a look at Isaiah 11. And here is the king, the kingdom that God has promised us, and that Solomon's kingdom prefigured. And notice how this is all connected to David and the Davidic kingdom and Solomon's kingdom, but only a picture, a snapshot of what much bigger things to come. This is what we mean by a type. Verse 1, then a shoot will spring forth from the stem of Jesse. And that shoot is David. And of course, Jesse is David's father. And a branch from his roots will bear fruit. Remember, Jesus was called the Nazarene. Well, the word Nazareth in Hebrew means branch. And Jesus is from Nazareth, Jesus the Nazarene. And notice verse 2, the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. That's exactly what happened when Jesus was baptized at the Jordan. And John the Baptist witnessed that. And by the way, the witness of John the Baptist is given, prophesied in Isaiah chapter 40. And then we see the historical fulfillment of this when John the Baptist was on the earth baptizing Jesus in the Jordan. Notice here, the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom. So Jesus had he had the book of Proverbs in his head and his heart. By the way, Solomon chapter 1, Proverbs chapter 1 talks about God will pour out his Spirit on you. That's in verses 20 to 23. That's what he wants his sons to be, full of God's Spirit, wisdom. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding. We have two words dealing with knowledge. Jesus had it. The Spirit of counsel, another word. And strength. Knowledge is power. I mean, that the scientific revolution is based on that, right? The Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. So with the Spirit of God, okay, is not some mystical feeling of some kind, guys. It's full of content of God's wisdom, his word. And I bring this up to people, I show it to them, okay, and they just look at me because they've been so brainwashed into thinking that the Spirit is some mindless operation of some kind where you get in the groove and you just kind of float through life and you get into the it's almost like at a football game, where you just get into the wave of it all, That is not the Spirit-filled ministry, guys. I'm sorry, it's got nothing to do with the Christianity. That's paganism. It's not real. Fear of the Lord, that's Proverbs 1, verse 7. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord, talking about the Messiah. The Spirit of God will be upon him, and he's going to practice wisdom. He will not judge, okay? So there, remember Solomon's going to be a judge. and his sons are supposed to be judged. If you want to be a judge, you have to be wise. He will not judge by what he sees, nor make decisions by what his ears hear. I mean, the problems are deeper. But with righteousness, he will judge the poor. Okay, I mean, we often complain the judge did not make the right choice. Well, he can only judge based on what he sees and hears. Okay, that has limitations. In a fallen world, that's as good as it gets. But the Messiah will come and fix that. He will solve the poverty problem, guys. Johnson, I think he had the war on poverty back in the 60s. And what did he do? He created the ghettos. Okay. And the poverty multiplied. And now, right now, I think the distinction between the super rich and the poverty now is, I know you don't hear this, but it's actually, it's off the charts right now. Yeah, we have no idea. The distinction between the super rich and the average guy, even now, let alone the poor person, is so outrageously high that it's unbelievable. And he will decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth. See, this is God's coming kingdom. God's going to straighten all this out. Think about the time that's going to be required to do this. Okay, we have all kinds of people. They want reparations today. The so-called left, they want to have the white man pay for the slavery of the past, okay, or whatever's going on. Homosexuals are trying to make, being whistled at when they were younger or back 30 years ago. Now they're mad. They want justice today to get back at for being made fun of. Well, look, at my whole life, people make fun of me all the time. Eventually, God's going to straighten that out. That's God's business. And that's exactly what we see here. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. How close are we to that? I don't know. It's a good question. I think we're getting pretty close. And with the breath of his lips, he will slay the wicked. He will use the word of God to do so. His word will bring about justice. Also, righteousness will be the belt about his loins, and faithfulness the belt about his waist. And now here, notice verse 6, and the wolf will dwell with the lamb. So everybody wants to pet the wolf today and never cry wolf, and that's a danger zone. Want to hug the bears? It can't be done. But in the future, you can. With the lamb, there's going to be animals in heaven, guys. I mean, whatever. I mean, I think remember in Revelation 19, you got white horses. People think you're taking that pretty literal, aren't you? Well, anyway, I'm being a little bit facetious, but not really. I mean, we have to take these verses seriously. And the leopard will lie down with the young goat. So all the predatory stuff is going to come to a stop. Right now, nature is full of predators. Even human predators. Our world is full of it. And the calf and the young lion and the fatling together. A little boy will lead them. Also the cow and the bear will graze. Their young will lie down together. The lion will eat straw like the ox. So here we have environmental paradise. The green movement, this is what they want. But they can't have it right now. Why? Because the world is fallen. And only the Messiah can set this up. So they are trying to reproduce through laws and regulations what only the Messiah can bring about by his grace and his mercy and his power. The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put in his hands on the viper's den. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Wow. We are not there, nowhere close right now. Then in that day, the nations will resort to the root of Jesse. That's God. Who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious. So that's the kingdom. And also Isaiah 2, verses 1 to 4 talks about that kingdom. And Solomon was a picture. He was like a type of that kingdom. And it was great, but it had its limitations. Okay, so we will stop right